Howdy everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Cascadian Show. This episode's going to be about a little game called John Wick Hex. But before we get into the video, a big thank you to Tenface, a local Cascadian musical artist, that came up with the background beat for this video. Music is a constantly changing art, and this artist stays old school as well as current, time and time again, with several different genres of music under their belt. So go ahead and check them out at tenface.bandcamp.com. Show them some love. Alright, now, John Wick Hex. Let's get into it. John Wick Hex, why are you the way you are? So, John Wick Hex came out for PS4 May 2020. Came out last fall 2019 for PC. So it's been out for a while, but it just came out for us PS4 guys. The story starts out with a man named Hex talking to Winston, the manager of the Continental, the Assassin's Hotel John goes to a lot, and he's basically threatening to kill him because he believes it's his birthright to lead all the assassins or something like that. This story takes place before the movies, so John doesn't have all that dead wife and murdered puppy rage, but he still gets the job done, I guess. Now, right away, in the first 10 seconds of the game, we're introduced to these cutscenes that are not animated, they are voiced, but not animated, and they do look like crude storyboard for a project that's still 7 months into pre-production. But this is how the story is delivered to us, so here we go. So the whole story is you being John, or by the graphics in this game, possibly Julian off of Trailer Park Boys, trying to rescue Winston. Now this story is cut up into 6, let's call them scenarios, and each scenario has 5 to 7 encounters or levels. After the first scenario, or the first 5 to 7 levels, you have to set up your scenarios or excursions, and you are given a certain amount of gold coins based on the scenario's difficulty. You spend these gold coins in either leveling up your suit that gives you passive buffs like harder to hit while moving, or more defense, or more attack power when doing a push or some other activity. You can also use the coins to put stashes, which I found almost necessary to beat the game. The game did get difficult in you only have 2 bandages per scenario, which would be 5 to 7 levels, and unless you spend your gold coins on bandages, you don't pick up any. You can also leave yourself different types of guns, as when you start a scenario, you start with a 15 clip gun and 1 extra clip. After that, all guns and weapons have to be picked up off dead bodies, and they never have clips. So if you're on a level that happens to have a bunch of hand-to-hand combat guys, where they're not dropping weapons you can use, you might want to put a gun in there for yourself as far as a stash. I didn't find myself using this feature too much, but I did use the bandages. I found at least 1 or 2 bandage per scenario, or 5 to 7 levels was pretty necessary for me, or you get to a spot where you can't get past, and you have to restart the whole scenario playing all those levels over again. Now, as far as gameplay goes, I've heard from a couple friends that have watched videos about this game and think they were watching the gameplay. They weren't. They were actually watching a movie it shows you after you finish the level, which I'll get to later. The gameplay is a top-down strategic game where you move via a grid pattern, which was pretty poorly done, and you end up, instead of walking in a straight line, lots of times you walk back and forth in diagonal lines, which just looks ridiculous, especially in the movie that you're, quote, making by playing it in a strategic fashion. There are 2 settings. There's Operator, where you have all the time in the world to pick a decision on this timeline system that they have, or Expedited, which you only have 7 seconds to choose an action. Now, the timeline kind of works like, it's almost turn-based, but not. You have a timeline that's constantly flowing. You can monitor it in the top of the screen, and each action you take takes a different amount of seconds or fractions of seconds, whether it be shooting, reloading, throwing a gun, punching, throwing, pushing. All these things take time. Now, once you get into a line of sight of an enemy, their timeline appears, and then you have to pick an action that will attack them or stun them before they do the same to you. The AI on these enemies is pretty ridiculous. I think that because certain moves in the game, like strikes to the face or throwing, can stun you or the AI often approaches you and punches you a couple times, and I think they could literally keep you stun locked or unable to move because of the amount of time it takes you to get out of a stunned state and for them to throw another strike. So the AI literally walks up to you, punches you, turns its back to you, and walks away while you shoot it in the back. It was pretty ridiculous. Now, the other managing factors of the gameplay are the 3 stats at the bottom of the screen. There you had your ammo, your health, and your focus. We've been over ammo. You start with a gun and 1 extra clip, and after that, throughout the rest of the 6 or 7 levels you have to play all the way up until you get to a boss level, you have to pick up guns from fallen enemies. The other stat down there is health. And health, you start off with 2 bandages per scenario, meaning 5 to 7 levels. And unless you pay money to have stashes of bandages put out on different parts of the level, you just have that health through the whole scenario. And the last thing is focus. Focus takes about half a second to regain. John does a little shimmy and it fills up about 80% of the focus. And focus is needed for parrying attacks, moving out of the way of an incoming strike. It also affects how well the enemies can hit you. You can crouch to reduce their accuracy, as well as if you have a high focus, their accuracy is low. There are other enemies that have focus, and it's the bosses at the end of these scenarios, and the only way that you can land a shot on them is by doing hand-to-hand combat to lower their focus. However, with bosses, hand-to-hand combat, which is a joke in this game, does lower their focus, but does not lower their health. You have to walk up and melee the boss, and then shoot them repeatedly before they get their focus back, which only takes them about half a second, but since the AI is bad, they turn their back to you and try to walk out of sight, and you just follow them, shooting and punching. This leads to some of the most unclimactic boss battles I've ever been in. And speaking of unclimactic, I think this leads me to the idea that I think inspired this game. And on paper, it's an awesome idea. And I'm a big fan of watching turn-based games in real time. I mean, half of a turn-based game is kind of filling in the blanks with your imagination. And I think that's what this game was trying to do, except without our imagination. Because at the end of each level, you're giving a replay option. And this isn't to replay the level, but actually what it is it's supposed to give you a cinematic version of what you just did. Since it's a turn-based strategy game, and not the best at that, it has very choppy gameplay. But with the replay cinematic version, it's supposed to give you a replay of what you did in real time, and it's basically like you choreographed your own John Wick fight. Unfortunately, this feature is done just as poorly as the rest of the game, and often the camera angles don't show the action that's happening, and when they do, it just shows you how flawed the game is, with character models' heads and arms spinning around once they're dead, with enemies hitting you twice and then having the audio for 6 or 7 punches going off, showing the awkwardness when John and an enemy both walk up to each other with guns and stare at each other for a solid 1.5 seconds before firing into each other's noses, as well as the camera shows all the AI that are present on the map through the walls, so it just takes you completely out of it. If this was executed right, I think it would be a super awesome feature. I'm a big fan of XCOM and Phoenix Point, and if I could replay my matches and see them in real time with all the idle animations cut out, that would be awesome. Unfortunately, it's a great idea, but they didn't execute it well at all. And that's another thing. Unfortunately, the color scheme and the music of this game were just terrible. The music sounded like it could be in a late 90s video game, and the color scheme. It was like someone saw the poster for John Wick 3 and was like, oh, there's bluish greens and pink in that. Let's make this whole game that. What should the gun color be? I don't know, bluish green. What if it has a shadow on it? Pink. What should the blood look like? Pink. What should his suit look like? Bluish green. If this game would have came out in maybe the year 2002, whenever the PS2 was out, this might have been an okay game back then, and still for $20. But overall, it's just another game in a long line of bad movie games, which is a bummer. I like Keanu, and it's because of him this game isn't getting an F. The final grade I'm giving this game is a D+, and that's just because Keanu is loosely involved in it. So overall, I guess I think this game was an excellent idea and very poorly executed. If this was a group of students that had this for a class project, A+. But as a retail game that you're selling for $20, I mean, this should have been a mobile game that for monetization, you guys just showed commercials in between the levels, not even microtransactions. So, Lionsgate. Next time you guys want to make a game off one of your IPs, I guess make sure if you're going to dip your toe, give the studio enough money to do it. Well, that's all for this one. That was a really painful game to play. It probably should only take 5 or 6 hours. It took me a month just because it was one of the most boring games I've played in ages. Another big thanks to Tim Face. I'll have a link in the description to check their stuff out. Give it a listen. New music is always awesome. Until next time, I'll try to bring a review a little bit sooner. I just got the green screen up. I know it's kind of weird on that side, and you can see my shadow. I got to get proper lighting, but I've learned how to set it up. I'm going to try to do a little bit more interesting stuff with it. Thanks for watching, and see you guys next time. Have a good one.